Your Excellencies, Honorables, ladies and gentlemen, friends of Rwanda, distinguished guests and fellow participants in today's commemoration. Good evening. I think I'm getting the times right here. Let me take this opportunity to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the organizers for their unwavering commitment in preparing this significant conference. The theme for this conference is remembering and honoring victims of the genocide against the Tutsi, a precursor for preventing future genocides. This particular theme resonates deeply with the collective memory of humanity. As we gather here, we recognize the immense importance of commemorating the lives lost during the dark chapter of our history. The genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda stands as a stark reminder of the horrors that can unfold when hatred, prejudice, and division prevail. It is our solemn duty to remember the victims, to honor their resilience, and to ensure that their stories are etched into our collective consciousness. By doing so, we not only pay tribute to those who suffered, but also lay the ground for preventing such atrocities from happening again. Today, as we commemorate, almost 3/4 of Rwandans are under the age of 35, as the President rightly pointed out. This means that most of the Rwandans were either not born or were too young to remember the direct horror of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. We therefore do have a collective responsibility to transmit this memory to the next generations and to ensure that such unspeakable crimes never happen again. During the Kwibuka 30 commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi, His Excellency President Paul Kagame stated, and I quote what he said, and I think it was said before I quote it. Today, our hearts are filled with grief and gratitude in equal measure. We remember our dead, and we are also grateful for what Rwanda has become. To the survivors amongst us, Immaculée, Jason, and many others in the room, we are in your debt, and I don't know whether we will be able to pay this debt. But on the contrary, we keep on asking you to give more because you are the only ones who have something to give, as His Excellency President Paul Kagame has reminded us. You've given forgiveness, you've given your memories, but we are always grateful for what you do for humanity. This statement of President Paul Kagame encapsulates the complex emotions of remembrance and resilience, acknowledging both the pain of loss and the progress made in rebuilding Rwanda. The scars and dark periods still echo through Rwanda's history, but the resilience and determination of its people have been instrumental in shaping a new narrative, one of healing, reconciliation, and progress. As we commemorate, we are reminded that the genocide against the Tutsi, just like all other genocides, was not a spontaneous event. Instead, it was meticulously planned, and it unfolded over several years, and the plan was implemented with minute detail. The tragic history of our country is a long process that started a few years before independence, with decades of dehumanization and anti-Tutsi pogroms following. I will just give you a brief context so that we understand what happened even before the genocide. There was the Bahutu Manifesto that laid the foundation for the genocidal project in 1957. 2 years later, in 1959, Joseph Habyarimana Gitera issued the Hutu 10 Commandments. Only 2 months afterwards, the first massacre of Tutsi took place on the All Saints' Day. Men, women, and children were massacred under the pretext of a revolution. Thus, the exile of the Tutsis began. From then onwards, a Tutsi child ceased to be regarded as human like any other. He or she was called the child of a snake or a cockroach. Tutsi children were subjected to physical and psychological trauma in order to push them to drop out of the school. In the classrooms, a distorted history of Rwanda was inserted in the curriculum. It depicted Tutsis as the invaders who had oppressed Hutus for centuries. This falsehood was used by teachers to justify the humiliation of Tutsi children and ultimately enthroned the genocide ideology in schools. The teachers separated pupils into Hutus and Tutsis in class. Sometimes, some of the children did not know the ethnic group that they belonged to, as they had to bring their parents to school the next day in order to clarify their situation. This way, racism was taught to children in schools. From 1990 to 1994, the Hutu 10 Commandments of Gitera were revised, better structured, and published by an extremist newspaper called Kangura. These 10 Commandments of hatred, combined with an extremist radio called the RTLM, taught anti-Tutsi hatred and incited people to participate in the genocide. As we commemorate the genocide against the Tutsi and honor the victims, it is crucial to recognize that at the heart of this tragedy lies the failure of the international community to heed the call for help of the Tutsi who are facing extermination. Numerous early warnings about the genocide against the Tutsi were systematically ignored. Let me highlight just a few documented instances due to the time constraint that we do have. In April 1993, that's 1 year before the commencement of the genocide, the UN Special Rapporteur on summary, arbitrary, and extrajudicial execution, René Denis Segui, conducted a mission to Rwanda. In August 1993, Segui reported to the UN Human Rights Commission that the trial of massacres of Tutsis had already begun and constituted genocide under the 1948 Genocide Convention. This is in August 1993. General Romeo Dallaire, commander of the UN Assistance Mission in Rwanda, called UNAMIR, reportedly warned the UN Department of Peacekeeping Operations, DPKO. Dallaire informed the department that Hutu extremists were planning a campaign to exterminate Tutsis. In a well-known cable to New York on January 11, 1994, that's 3 months before the genocide, Dallaire requested authority to search for and seize caches of machetes and other weapons that had been shipped in Rwanda for the Hutu militias who are known as the Interahamwe in Kinyarwanda. However, Iqbal Riza, deputy to the then Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping, Kofi Annan, denied Dallaire permission to act, citing that it exceeded UNAMIR's mandate. He instructed Dallaire to take the information to the Rwanda government, many of whose members were deeply involved in planning the genocide. These early warnings underscore the tragic failure of the international community to prevent the devastating events that unfolded in Rwanda in 1994. Rwandans will never understand why these conspicuous early warnings were ignored. Was it because the lives of the victims of the genocide were not worth saving? This question perpetually lingers in the minds of many. As we commemorate the genocide against the Tutsi, we remember that it was the young, patriotic, and courageous Rwandans in the Rwandan Patriotic Army, the armed wing of the Rwandan Patriotic Front, who played a pivotal role in halting the genocide. Under the leadership of President Paul Kagame, who himself was in his mid-30s at the time, they took decisive action to save lives while the international community largely stood by and watched. As we commemorate the genocide against the Tutsi, we remember how the country had become in 1994. The genocide against the Tutsi, which unfolded between April and July 1994, left Rwanda truly shattered. The country resembled a mass grave, devoid of cash and commodities. Its new government grappled with an enormous post-genocide crisis and a daunting task of rebuilding from ground zero. In the aftermath of the genocide against the Tutsi, Rwandans faced immense challenges in rebuilding this country. Some of the tough measures implemented during this critical period include, and I'll just name a few in order to put context to some of the tough decisions made in the aftermath of the genocide. The first one, which people don't really speak about, was Paul Kagame's refusal to become the first post-genocide president. When the Rwandan Patriotic Front liberated Rwanda, there was a prevailing expectation that Paul Kagame would become the first post-genocide president. However, President Kagame respectfully declined the position. Despite pressure from RPF members, his decision was a symbolic contribution to unity and reconciliation. President Kagame wanted to emphasize that he and the other members of RPA had not sacrificed their lives to assume power, but to liberate Rwandans from the oppressive governance that had led to the genocide against the Tutsi. The second important decision that was made was power sharing for the unity and reconciliation. The Rwandan Patriotic Front recognized that power sharing was crucial for the healing of the nation. Despite overthrowing the genocidal government, the RPF reached out to the other political parties in Rwanda. Together, they formed the interim government of national unity. This principle of power sharing remains significant in Rwanda's current constitution. The third key decision that was made was the immediate military integration of defeated soldiers in the national army. Immediately after halting the genocide against the Tutsi, the defeated soldiers were reintegrated into the national army. The first cohort, constituted of up to 1,500 soldiers by the beginning of the year 1995. I can just name a few examples here. The current Minister of Defense and the immediate former Minister of Defense, who is now the Minister in charge of emergency management, were both officers of the defeated army, and now they sit in the cabinet in Rwanda. Some soldiers who fled to Congo, who formed part of the forces that planned to attack Rwanda, and who returned voluntarily, were captured in the battlefield, and who had not committed genocide, were reintegrated and given senior positions in the army, as well as in other security organs. By the year 2000, the numbers show that the soldiers from the defeated army were more in numbers than those from the Rwandan Patriotic Army that had halted the genocide. The other decision that I want to present to you is the refugee repatriation. The post-genocide government made a tough decision. All refugees in neighboring countries should be repatriated. Many refugees faced miserable conditions or posed security threats to Rwanda, especially those in the Democratic Republic of Congo. As the 1994 refugees returned, the government ensured that everyone occupying property belonging to returning refugees would vacate those houses. Those who had lived in houses abandoned during the genocide were either returnees from previous massacres or survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi, whose properties were destroyed. They were provided with land and temporary structures to rebuild their lives, a process which was known in Rwanda as TTP. That was, you are given a small land with a tent, and then build a temporary house, and then in future build a permanent house Additionally, refugees who had fled Rwanda in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s were encouraged by the government not to pursue their property if it was already occupied by others. In the aftermath of the genocide against the Tutsi, Rwanda faced significant challenges in the justice sector. Close to 120,000 suspects were provisionally detained, awaiting trial for their involvement in the genocide. However, there were 244 judges and 12 prosecutors, most of whom did not even possess a law degree. Fewer than 50 Rwandans in the entire country in 1994 had a law degree. If conventional courts were to be used, it would have taken Rwanda over 150 years to prosecute all the suspects. In order to address this challenge, Rwanda established Gacaca courts. The term Gacaca derives from the Kinyarwanda word of grass, representing the place where communities traditionally gathered to resolve disputes. These community-based courts drew inspiration from indigenous methods of dispute resolution, but also incorporated elements of punitive justice. The Gacaca system aimed at achieving transitional and restorative justice. It emphasized on swift processing of the cases, community involvement in the justice process, victims' opportunity to learn the truth, as well as perpetrators' chance to seek forgiveness. Importantly, during that time, the death sentence was abolished during this time. Now, when the Gacaca system, we all acknowledge, did not offer a perfect form of justice, it was the only viable alternative given the extraordinary context Rwanda faced then. The system had its flaws, but it allowed Rwanda to address immense challenge of prosecuting genocide-related cases in an efficient manner and involved local communities in the process. In the pursuit of justice, Rwanda grappled with the complexities of balancing efficiency, fairness, as well as reconciliation. As we commemorate the genocide against the Tutsi, certain aspects which Madame Deritu spoke of remain deeply perplexing. And one such issue is the use of the vague terminology when describing the genocide, especially 3 decades after its occurrence. The choice of terminology significantly impacts our understanding and memory of historical events. Terms such as Rwandan genocide, which Madame Deritu spoke of, or all victims of the Rwandan genocide, can inadvertently dilute the gravity of what transpired. These broad labels may obscure the specific target of the genocide. The Genocide Convention, as has been pointed out by the previous speakers, defines genocide in a very specific manner. Genocide is defined as acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a particular group. To constitute genocide, there must be proven intent on the part of perpetrators to physically destroy the targeted group. In the case of Rwanda, the group that was unequivocally intended to be exterminated were the Tutsis. To honor the victims and acknowledge the truth, we must use precise language, referring to the genocide as it should be referred to, the genocide against the Tutsi. This accurately reflects the specific group that suffered systematic violence and extermination. This terminology ensures that the historical record remains clear and the memory of those lost is preserved. To apply these vague terminologies to what is commemorated today will be to negate what was equivocally determined by the Appeals Tribunal of the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda in a very famous case, the Prosecutor versus Karemera and others case in 2006, where the court held in a judicial notice that between the 6th April 1994 and 17th July 1994, there was a genocide in Rwanda against the Tutsi ethnic group, and I quote the judgment, the specific paragraph. And when taking this judicial notice, the ICTR meant that the fact of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda was beyond contestation. The fact was further reaffirmed by the UN General Assembly resolution that Madame Derito spoke of. As we commemorate the genocide against the Tutsi, it still remains deeply perplexing that certain countries continue to provide a safe haven for genocide suspects who remain at large. Rwandans, please, just very clear and simple and straightforward. These perpetrators should either be extradited to Rwanda or, as an alternative, tried in the countries where they are found. After all, we all agree that the crime of genocide is universal in character, transcending borders and demanding accountability. The pursuit of justice knows no boundaries, and the memory of the victims compels us to ensure that those responsible face the consequences of their actions. As we commemorate today, Rwandans grapple with the perplexing reality that genocide deniers are granted platforms in certain countries and even by institutions such as universities. These platforms only help to perpetuate the genocide ideology with an insidious intention to complete what was left unfinished, and that is the extermination of the Tutsis. The weight of this historical truth is both a burden and a call to action for those who seek justice, remembrance, as well as healing. As I approach my conclusion, let me quote what Andrew Wallace says, a well-renowned English researcher who specializes in the Central and East Africa research, where he writes in an article entitled "Denying Genocide, the Rwanda Plan." And he states, I quote him, that genocide denial is the last phase of genocide. It denounces the victims and rehabilitates the perpetrators. It also robs the victims' culture of all moral order. And I end the quote. Today, the rise of social media contributes the victims' culture of denialists, contributes another weapon to the denialists' armory. Its particular climate allows anyone to pose as an expert with an objective, or at least what they call a plausible view, often with links added to impart a sense of evidence-based authority. Such contributions are often a disguise for well-orchestrated, and sometimes referred to as anonymous, public relations campaigns of disinformation. And because of the numbers, the blizzard of the information that is out there by the deniers, this propaganda at times is taken as the new truth by some credulous sections of the public, and this is quite dangerous. And in such fallow and fertile ground, genocide denial can quickly take root, first by revising the truth, and then second by reversing the truth. As we commemorate today, Rwandans grapple with the heart-wrenching reality that the remnants of genocide forces, known today as the FDLR because they have changed names quite often, continue to thrive in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. These forces enjoy full support in the region and have vowed to reorganize and complete that which was left unfinished in 1994. The current unfolding events in DRC mirror those that took place in Rwanda during the genocide against the Tutsi, all while the international community remains seemingly indifferent. In the 30th commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi, President Kagame issued a clarion call for all of us to do what is right. He stated, and I quote, "The Rwandan story shows how much power human beings have within them. Whatever power you do have, you might as well use it to tell the truth and do what is right. It is the fundamental truth that must guide our relentless pursuit of future, where never again is more than a statement, but is a reality for all humanity. Let us unequivocally recognize the horrific genocide that claimed over 1 million Tutsi for what it truly was, a genocide meticulously orchestrated to exterminate a group designated as Tutsis. The near universal consensus acknowledged that it was indeed a genocide against the Tutsi. Furthermore, we must actively combat the genocide ideology and denial with unflinching determination. These toxic elements of ideology and hate speech are insidious recipes that can lead to the darkest depths of human cruelty. Let us stand united together, ensuring that history's painful lessons guide us towards aspiring for the future of a safe and just space for humanity. My fellow Rwandans and friends of Rwanda, let us unapologetically continue to remember, unite, and renew. I thank you for your attention.